Good afternoon, fellow Canadian patriots. Make no mistake, President Donald Trump is coming for Canada. I just recently posted a list of more than 30 occasions where Donald Trump has threatened Canadian sovereignty and has threatened to annex us. I know it would be very easy to feel depressed, disillusioned, and powerless at a time like this, but we're not powerless. There's 40 million of us. So I wanted to consider how real are these threats and what can I do as a Canadian. First, I looked at Trump's motives. He's motivated by money, by power, and his insatiable need to be number one. I also looked at 5 other factors. What does Canada have that Donald Trump wants that the US is in dire need of? Number 1, Canada has a lot of fresh water reserves. Number 2, we have a wealth of minerals. I also looked at the Elon Musk effect. I looked at Trump's obvious alliance with Vladimir Putin. I also saw that the senator from Rhode Island had introduced a bill, the No Invading Allies Act, if you can even believe it. So if that bill passes the House and the Senate, it would prevent the US administration from earmarking funds to enable the US military to invade Canada. So what are our leaders saying? The outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he said that he believes Donald Trump's threats to annex Canada are serious. He further went on to say that Donald Trump's goal is to see a complete collapse of the Canadian economy, thereby making us easier to be annexed. Canada's Minister of Defense, Mr. Bill Blair, he said that he finds Trump's comments are disrespectful, offensive, and concerning, but he does not believe that Trump presents a real threat to Canada. I'm bothered by his comments. Let's look at Canada's water supply. We have over 2 million freshwater lakes, and 5 of those are the Great Lakes, 4 of which are on our border with the USA. There's currently a Great Lakes arrangement and agreement that says that the Great Lakes are to be protected into perpetuity. Also, that neither Canada or the US shall deplete the supply of water without replenishing it. But Donald Trump, look, we've seen he just floats his nose at laws and conventions. He doesn't care. And what about the US need for water? We all remember the horrific California fires. The Rio Grande River, every year it runs dry. Currently, the US Southwest is in the midst of a severe drought. And I read earlier this week on a US government website that areas in the Midwest are also being struck by drought conditions. Donald Trump wants our water. Surely he could use that to refill his underground aquifers. Next, let's consider mineral reserves. And I'm going to talk about China. Don't forget, Donald Trump needs to be number one. We all know what his ego is like. China right now is dominating the mineral reserve space. They have vast resources of their own, and they have also bought controlling interests in mines in various countries around the world. China weaponizes its mineral reserves through export restrictions and bans. Trump would love to do that. He needs to play the strong man, and minerals are a way to wealth. Consider how important artificial intelligence is. China has created an artificial intelligence system known as DeepSeek. DeepSeek was created at a fraction of the cost of many of the chatbots that came out of the Silicon Valley. None of us will ever be able to forget that horrifying, disgusting meeting in the Oval Office between President Trump, Vice President Vance, and the real patriotic President Zelensky from Ukraine, who's in the midst of a war with Vladimir Putin. Don't forget, part of the deal that Trump was trying to make with the Ukraine was for him to walk away with a 50-50 deal and a right to half of the mineral reserves that Ukraine has. They're very rich in minerals. That deal never happened. So Canada's mineral wealth. We have a wealth of potash, aluminum, copper, cobalt, uranium, and Trump needs these. In 2023, Canada supplied 56% of the U.S. domestic aluminum needs to the tune of $16.9 billion. Let me tell you what these minerals are used for. Electric vehicles, batteries, internet connectivity, smartphones, artificial intelligence, military equipment. Let's not forget about Elon Musk. He's just like Trump. He's got this insatiable need for power. And because of his actions and him taking a chainsaw to so many US government departments, his comeuppance thus far has been massive losses to his company. Tesla has suffered a $22.8 billion loss. Starlink, his internet company, has suffered a $22 billion loss because of his disparaging comments about the Mexican investor who had inked that deal with him. And the Premier of Ontario, Mr. Doug Ford, canceled a $100 million contract with Elon's Starlink. The race for AI dominance is on. On January 22nd, 2025, Trump declared an AI emergency. He unveiled a $500 billion package. That money is going to AI research and work in a new project that he's called Stargate. Elon Musk is pissed about that $500 billion because unless things have changed, he was not included in those monies. That contract went to other people in Silicon Valley. So Elon, he needs minerals. Trump needs minerals for his AI emergency. He didn't get his deal with Ukraine. Ukraine minerals would do, Canadian minerals would do, but we're a lot closer. If there's no mineral supply, there's no AI. Look at Trump's focus on this, and the co-president Elon Musk has been in the AI game for quite some time. So Elon was partnered with Sam Altman, and they opened a company called OpenAI. There was a power struggle about who was going to control the company. Elon left, and OpenAI went on to develop ChatGPT. Thereafter, Elon developed another company, xAI, and Elon, with his Doge chainsaw, another thing that he's furiously working on is a chatbot to use in US government administration. If Trump moves forward with an attempt to annex Canada, there's a couple of key things he's going to have to do. He's going to have to create economic destabilization as well as political destabilization. Let's talk about the economy. First, there's the trade war and reciprocal tariffs, all started by Donald Trump. The governor of the Bank of Canada earlier this week reduced interest rates. The stock market is in a free fall. Trump keeps threatening to crush the Canadian auto industry. Earlier this week, New Brunswick announced that it was going to have to operate in a deficit. So he's well on his way to trying to crush the Canadian economy. The outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he talked about Canada's mineral supply, and he said that it holds the most significant potential for Canadian economic growth. Canadian intelligence experts have weighed in on this. Neil Bisson, he was a former CSIS intelligence officer, and he's now the director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network. He says that economic distress is Canada's weak spot. He also said that the young and economically disadvantaged Canadians will be particularly vulnerable to the siren call from Trump, which is going to include a social media disinformation campaign. Bisson says that Trump is looking for a crack in Canada's armor, and he'll exploit it. So here's a direct quote. If you have individuals who are concerned about where their next meal is coming from, or if they're going to get a roof over their head, that supersedes sovereignty. Bisson talked about the propaganda campaign, and if there's significant economic stress, there's going to be individuals in Canada who would potentially be co-opted by Trump to push that narrative forward, the propaganda narrative. As far as political destabilization goes, Trump would seek to drive a wedge between the left and the right. He'd be looking for any cracks, any far-right groups, any groups who want to separate from Canada. A couple of former directors of CSIS have weighed in on this issue. Former director Ward Alcock headed the agency for 10 years, including during the 9/11 attacks, and he also served as a national security advisor. Alcock says that Canada must beware of Trump campaigns to destabilize our country. He's noted that the CIA has worked to destabilize many governments. Alcock said, "I would regard Musk as a problem on a number of fronts." Dick Fadden, he's another former head of CSIS, and he was a national security advisor to former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. He posed this question. He said, "Is Trump trying to change political views in this country? If so, that's foreign interference. It's no more acceptable from the United States than it is from China or Russia or anyone else." Fadden went on to say, "It's possible that the US government could finance pro-annexation groups within Canada to create the impression of a groundswell of support for the idea." He said they have an extraordinary capacity to do this. Fadden said, "If you keep repeating things often enough, people start believing it. If it continues down this path for years, virtually anybody can be worn down." So the Canadian government needs to provide a solution to help us weather this economic destabilization. Bisson, he says that government assistance for those affected by tariffs could blunt the impact of propaganda. Bisson also said that the Canadian government trying to shore up the political opinion within their own citizenship to say, okay, we've got this covered. We're going to take care of you no matter what. It's hugely important. Bisson said, because if that wasn't done, providing economic aid to Canadians, and things were starting to destabilize economically, that would give people even more reason to fall back on the thinking of, well, maybe it's a better idea if we just succumbed to this. In February, there was a billboard in Alberta. It said, "Tell Danielle," that's Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, "Tell Danielle, let's join the US." And beside that was a picture of Danielle Smith posing with Donald Trump at his Mar-a-Lago resort. The billboard was funded by a group that's known as America Fund. And America Fund, it's backed by a party that was known as Wexit, like Western Exit, kind of like Brexit. And it's also been known as the Maverick Party. Peter Downing, a former RCMP officer, he's the founder and force behind this Wexit party. He also has a history of calling on the Alberta government to separate from Canada. A couple of quotes from Downing in an article earlier this week. He said, "The billboard is only the beginning. More ads are planned as the America Fund raises more money to have its voice heard." He also said, "We're contracting with folks in America to tell our story, that this whole political narrative that Canada doesn't want to be the 51st state just isn't true." So remember, separatist parties, that's one way that Trump can create this groundswell and political division. And it's going to be a targeted social media disinformation campaign. So what kind of reach does Donald Trump have on social media? Well, he's got his Truth Social. He's all over X, formerly known as Twitter. And hey, who is he buddies with that owns social media platforms? Just think about the inauguration. Who was sitting right behind Trump? In fact, in front of former presidents. You got Elon Musk, the owner of X. You've got Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of Meta and Facebook. Zuckerberg is quoted as saying that artificial intelligence will replace mid-level engineers by 2025. He believes AI can take over coding tasks, allowing human engineers to focus on higher level problem solving and creativity. He said that in a recent interview with Joe Rogan. Yes, Joe Rogan was also at the inauguration. Joe Rogan spoke at a Trump rally. And who are Trump's biggest donors? So Joe Rogan has a huge social media following. The Joe Rogan Show, young guys especially, the one that the former CSIS director said would be particularly vulnerable to this misinformation campaign on social media, they're like devoted Joe Rogan followers. They worship this guy. There's other significant and influential social media personalities and influencers in the US. They're young white guys. Yes, they were also at the inauguration. They had seats in a prominent position. Those are the Paul brothers, Logan and Jake Paul. They were involved in MMA and boxing, but now they have social media platforms with like 27 and 30 million followers. Most of their followers are young white men. These young guys, the social media influencers with millions of loyal followers, just prior to the US election, they endorsed Donald Trump and they were parroting Trump talking points, propaganda, anti-immigration rhetoric, the economy, women's rights, abortion. They were talking about Mexicans and Arabs and Muslims. Like it's all like super disgusting. There's another social media influencer. His name is Theo Vaughn. And prior to the election, Theo Vaughn interviewed Donald Trump on his podcast. Joe Rogan famously interviewed Donald Trump on his podcast. So these are the ways and means that Donald Trump has to have this huge reach and spread disinformation and brainwash and influence Canadian citizens. And then there's Donald's bestie, Vladimir Putin. He interfered in the 2016 and the 2024 elections, undermining the Democratic Party and spreading false information. So what they do is they create these fake accounts. They create these AI-generated images. They seek to divide. They post inflammatory content. They'll target divisive hot-button issues like around Black Lives Matter, immigration, around women's rights, just to see if they can drive a wedge and push voters toward their candidate of choice. There's going to be some other destabilizing tactics. One, which is already circulating through the air, is going to be to demoralize Canadians. Part of that tactic is like this guy, he's back and forth and back and forth. Now we have tariffs, now we don't. Now we've got to pause, now we don't. Now I'm going to double tariffs. All of the executive orders that are coming out of Washington, all of it is dizzying. You've got this red herring about the fentanyl that's crossing from Canada into the US, which has been determined to be 1% of the fentanyl that's found in the US. So now Canada has a fentanyl czar to appease Donald Trump. $1.3 billion has been earmarked for the fight against fentanyl. Now Canada has a border security plan, choppers, additional surveillance, personnel, information sharing with the US. Trump is trying to confound, confuse, divert our attention. Don't fall into his bullshit, but don't look away. We have to stay vigilant. In the news this week, the Ukraine says that it is doubtful about whether or not Donald Trump's going to follow through with ceasefire talks with Vladimir Putin. I saw also that the EU has raised tariffs on US products such as beef, poultry, bourbon, and peanut butter. Trump is going to go crazy. He's going to retaliate even harder. So what can I do as a Canadian? Number one, recognizing that I'm not powerless. We all have a circle of influence. We need to have conversations. We need to talk about politics. We need to talk about our federal leadership. Surely we are going to have a federal election called very soon. I can't overemphasize the importance of voting. Thanks for this stat, Danya. I see that in the last US election, only 46% of Americans voted. And so now they have Donald Trump. In 2021, 62.5% of Canadians voted. So you got to go. Now, look at our options. We have the liberal option and we have the conservative option. We need somebody who we trust and respect right now. Somebody who's not going to bend to Donald Trump. Somebody who has experience and can lead us through the economic uncertainty that we're going to face as long as Trump is in power. We need to stay together. We have to be cohesive as a country. We need to support each other, especially folks who are feeling disenfranchised, who feel like they have an axe to grind, people who are struggling economically. This disinformation campaign, I've got a couple of people on my Facebook who are posting things that are really suspect and are the kind of people that Donald Trump would recruit to spread disinformation. I wanted to delete these people, but I'm going to try to engage with them, or at the very least, when I see something that smells like disinformation and propaganda, I can report those posts. We have to be vigilant. Half of what we see online is generated by AI and is fake information. I found a website about how one can combat online misinformation. I'll drop this in a link. We can fact check, and there's tools available for that. There's something called a reverse image search engine, so you can copy a picture into this search engine and it will tell you if it's fake. There's a website which is Who Is, so you can learn who is the creator behind content you might find online. We can't be lazy about this. Check profiles to see if they appear to be authentic. The link I post will tell you how to sniff out fake profiles, and also we can report false information. Trump is coming for Canada. He's made that clear. We need a collective resistance. I thought about what would my ancestors call on me to do. My mom and dad remembered German soldiers coming to the door during the Second Great War when they were living as children in Holland. And then, of course, there's my birth parents and that line of ancestry. They were enslaved people. They'd want me to be part of the resistance, and I'm happy to do it, even if it means that I have to take up arms. I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm not trying to be a fear-mongerer, but we really need to be alert because Donald Trump presents a clear and present danger. He's already shown that. Remember what one of our Canadian icons, Mike Myers, said, or at least mouthed on Saturday Night Live, elbows up, but we're Canadian, so we'll be polite as long as we can. And then when we can't, we'll just fight. We got this. We got to stay together. We got to stay strong. We got this.